foam rubber skin.
I'm applying a good coat of sterilic acid to the core. This will prevent the foam rubber from sticking to the core. Allow the sterilic acid to dry. After drying, it may leave a residue. This residue must be brushed off with a dry brush. Here are the foam rubber components. Measuring the components: 30 grams of flow, 4 grams of ammonia, 24 grams of gelling agent, 337 grams of foam base. $67 grams of foam agent, 33 grams of curing agent, and 30 grams of flow will be added to the mix. Do not add the gelling agent. The gelling agent will be added during the mixing. Using a Sunbeam Mix Master, this is my mixing schedule. Setting the timer for 9 minutes and 30 seconds, pressing start at the starting of the mixer. The temperature in my room is 69 degrees and the humidity is 50. This is very important. The hotter the room could speed up gelling time. Mixing foam, or running foam as they call it, can be difficult, so just be patient and work things out. At 1 minute mark on the timer, I add the gelling agent. At 30 seconds, I start turning the bowl backwards using the spatula to clean off the edges of the bowl. Not using a foam injector gun, I'm simply just putting this into the mold. Not trying to put a whole lot at one time, I need to brush it into the mold. This will avoid trapping air or making air bubbles. This makes me nervous. By putting this into the mold, I have a time. This time is the gelling time. I need to make sure I close this mold before it starts to gel. Some of the skins that I ran for the Animatronic Project did have bubbles in it. I don't know why. I blame it on myself. I tried this way in putting it into the mold by using a paintbrush and just working quick but smoothly and not being so nervous. That was my big problem. I put the core onto the mold and it was time to bake. I closed the lid to the oven and I turn on the hot plate. And also, I plugged in the fan. This is important. Do not forget this or it will not cure right. I press the foam with my fingertip. If it doesn't come back, it's gelled. It was a 6-minute gel time. I baked this skin for 11 hours at a temperature of 125 degrees. I open the oven at 100 degrees and allow it to cool. Look, a foam rubber piece, flexible and soft. The mold is still warm. It's under 100 degrees. The core and silicone came out of the mother mold together, like I designed it. Now I'll just remove the silicone mold. I sprinkle baby powder or talcum powder on top. This will prevent the foam rubber skin to sticking to itself. Now I can remove the skin from the core. And don't forget that the foam has a sprue on the core. This must be cut off so you don't tear the skin. The skin came out beautiful. There were a few bubbles on the mouth, but very tiny. Now I'll show you how I repaired the bubbles in the mouth. These are small bubbles. Using a cotton swab and liquid latex, I filled in each bubble with a little liquid latex, building up the layers after each layer dried. After removing the foam flash, I used a soldering iron. I needed to cut a groove behind each lip. This will allow the lip wire to go in place. I burn this edge away with a soldering iron. After burning, I powder it with talcum powder. I burn a little and then I powder, and keep repeating this process. I need to be careful because I can go through the skin. Well, the mouth is finished. Now I need to do the eyelids. I do the same thing as before. I'll just remove the foam flash. Using the hot iron, I burn the edge. and powder it afterwards. I need to be very careful here because the foam area here is thin. Now it's time to build this support table. I take 2 pieces of lumber, these are 1/2 inch thick, and sandwich them together. I place these center blocks on top for pressure. Then I cut the size I want. Using galvanized pipe, the pipe will angle the head above the computer. This will give the illusion that the head is floating. There's a lot of people that build computers, and I'm one of them. I enjoy building computers. It's really fun, and it saves you money because some of these store-bought computers, you really don't know what you're getting. A lot of people don't realize how easy it is to put one together. I just bought some parts and did it. The parts you need is basically a hard drive, a processor, a DVD-ROM or burner, floppy if needed, a motherboard, video card, memory, power supply, and a case. You can build a computer in less than 2.5 hours. Here I'm installing a few last pieces, the memory and the video card. Now it's time to install the OS and the drivers. After plugging up the keyboard, the mouse, and the monitor and speakers, you can plug in this device. This is the adapter for the controller. This controller will control the animatronic. I added some servo extensions and labeled each wire. This is a must. Dropping the servo controller out of the top of the head, I had to make the box. I purchased a small box from Radio Shack. This will allow me to put my controller inside. 2 holes were drilled. This will allow each set of 8 wires to come out. The skull lid was removed to do this test. I returned the skull lid and placed the skin on. The skin is not glued, it's just a movement test. The lip wires, metal beads, will now be glued in place. I'm using 6-minute epoxy to glue the balls in place. I place a small bit of epoxy on the guitar string and move the ball in place. The ball is not butted up against the ring. There's a slight space there. The entire set of brows needed to have tension springs put on them. I needed to change the mechanics of the center brow. This is what I come up with. Several different types. I worked 3 days on trying to develop the mechanics for the center brow, and what worked the best was a simple slide method. After getting the tension springs on, it was time for another test. Making ears for the animatronic. The ears would be covered with hair. They wouldn't move. I just wanted to put some ears on it. I took a picture of an ear, used it as a guide. Using the clay, Roman number 3, I started sculpting. And looking at the pictures for reference, just getting a basic look of a kind of a human ear, but I still wanted to make it alien. Using rubbing alcohol to smooth out any wrinkles. With a sculpting tool, I can start adding some detail. There's one thing about sculpting ears, there's two of them. Now I need to make some dental acrylic inserts. It's simply just two pieces of dental acrylic, kind of like a half disc. The inserts on the edge has a groove in it. I take the insert, just build up clay all around it and set the ear on top. I spray both ears with crystal clear. I add water clay. This will give me a divider wall. I'm using the lid as the base for the mold. This lid goes to an ice cream bucket. I cut the bottom out of the bucket, and this will make the top. And this is where I'll pour into. So this divider dam's all blocked out. So now I'll just spray it with crystal clear and mix up dental stone. With a paintbrush, I brush on the dental stone. This is called a splash coat. And after that, I just simply pour the dental stone into the mold. I gently vibrate the entire mold by hand on the table. This will bring the air bubbles to the top of the mold. After the dental stone sets up, I remove the lid and start removing the water clay. I press the mold out of the bucket, and I continue removing the water clay. I remove the rest of the clay with water and place this back into the container. I block out the edge of the mold with a small roll of water clay. Then I apply a thin layer of Vaseline. I mix up the dental stone and pour it into the mold, but I just fill it up to the top of the inserts. After filling, I allow it to set up. After about an hour, I can demold. Now I'll remove the clay ears. I need to be careful here and not to damage my molds. Also, I clean up with rubbing alcohol to remove any of the oil clay. After cleaning and drying, I apply a thin layer of Johnson's paste wax. I add white and black oil-based paint to Molmax 15T Clear. After mixing, I add the B component and mix well. The first coat of silicone is brushed on. This is quite messy, so be sure to wear gloves. It looks messy, but I do overextend it so I don't get any air bubbles. Then I close the mold and I pour the silicone into the mold. I take the insert and place it inside each ear. Now this is eyeballing, so I have to be careful. The inserts will float on top and will also fill those grooves that are on the outside edge. I allow it to cure overnight, then I demold. It's somewhat tacky. It's kind of scary like it didn't cure. In a few hours it should be less tacky. You can also powder it with baby powder. With a pair of small scissors I trimmed off the flash. Attaching the ears to the skull lid. I remove the inserts from each ear. The inserts will just pop right out of the ear. And I drill a small hole. After attaching it to the skull lid, I can just simply pop the ear back onto the insert. I want to fill these gaps, so I mix up some dental acrylic. Raising a screw, this will bring the ears out more. And simply fill with dental acrylic, and careful not to get any into the groove. This would mess up the socket. I trim the flash off the ears close as I can. This seam will be covered with hair anyway. I return the ears to the sockets and do a test fitting. Now I will even out this gap here with dental acrylic again. I'll spread a good portion of dental acrylic through this gap to even out, to blend in this whole ear. The dental acrylic will not hurt the silicone. I dip my finger in monomer and just press it in place, smooth out any wrinkles, kind of smooth it out. This will set up in 10 minutes, ready for hair. I made a bracket and I attached it to the pipe, covered it with Velcro. Put the other piece of Velcro on the controller box and press it in place.
Painting and herring.
I'm painting the foam rubber skin with a pro adhesive. This pro adhesive is non-tacky. Mixing pro adhesive and acrylic paint 50-50, you get packs. This was developed by makeup master Dick Smith. The airbrush I'm using is Pache H. This is a single action airbrush. This first coat is the base coat. This is medium gray. The acrylic paint I'm using is liquid form. If it gets too thick, I can add distilled water to thin the batch out so it'll flow easier out of the airbrush. The colors I'm using are all grays and a black. I'm using light gray, medium gray, dark gray, and black. I really enjoy airbrushing. I just wish I was a better painter. It just takes time. You just have to practice. After painting, I'll wait about 30 minutes for it to dry. Then I'll sprinkle it with a good coat of talcum powder. And I remove it from the core. I put the skin now onto the skull just to check it out and see how it looks. Now it's time to paint the inside of the mouth. Using packs again with a little red tint to it, I brush on a little area on the inside of the mouth. I didn't airbrush this, I just simply painted it with a paintbrush and stippled it with a sponge. I allowed the packs to dry and I sprinkled it with talcum powder. Placing it onto the skull again, now it's time for touch-ups. Just using a paintbrush, light coats of packs, and powdering it again. National Fiber Technology is where I'm getting my hair from. This is expensive hair, but it's beautiful. I'm gluing down the ears with Silpoxy. This is a silicone adhesive from Smooth On. I will also use Silpoxy with the hair on the ears. I need to make a pattern so I can put this hair behind the ear. And to do this, I was going to use paper, but it's just too rigid, so I turned to fabric. I just make some marks on the fabric, do an outline, and then I'll cut out the outline. Well, here's the pattern for this ear. Now I take the fabric pattern and I transfer it to a piece of cardboard. This will allow me to lay the piece of cardboard onto the fabric fur. I draw some arrows onto the cardboard. This will indicate where the hair needs to flow. The arrow also indicates that this side needs to be onto the fabric. If I do it the other way, it will be wrong. So arrow side down. I use a Bob Parker blade. This is a scalpel. This fabric fur, the backing on the hair, is very flexible and it's difficult to cut. But you must cut all fabric furs with a razor blade or some type of scalpel. I use metal tape to stick it onto the fabric, and this is a new pattern. This will allow me to cut strips. Just follow the edge of the metal tape. I place some Silpoxy adhesive onto the hair, and then I apply it to the back of the ear. And I do the same thing to the strip of hair. Hair can be difficult to lay. Just have to be patient. I'm also using hair clips. Hair clips keeps the hair from going in the wrong direction. It's a must. I'll be laying this piece right here in front of the ear, and I'll be using silpoxy. I just place a little bit on a mixing stick and apply it to the ear. The 4-way stretch material can be difficult to work with, and cutting is even harder. I'm using silpoxy on the back skull lid. I wanted to try different types of adhesive. Just wanted to work things out. Which one was easier, which one flowed better. The silpoxy is like a paste. You could spread it on the hair, on the fabric itself. This is how I laid a piece of fabric hair. I pulled the hair back forward, matched up the other two sections, and pressed in place. Laying hair is like laying brick. You start from the bottom, work your way up. I used a paper pattern this time. This is a flat area. The back skull is finished. Now I can test it, see how it looks fitted onto the skull. Before I lay any more hair, it's time to glue the skin onto the skull. You don't want to glue the entire skull. You just want to glue certain sections. This will give the appearance of muscles. With a marker, I just mark some guidelines, just showing where I need to lay the glue. Shoemaker's rubber cement is recommended by Dick Smith for gluing foam rubber appliances onto the skull for an animatronic. I had trouble finding it. It was always in large quantities, so I had to go with regular rubber cement. After applying the glue, I simply put the skin onto the skull and simply press in place. You have to pull the skin back for the eyelids. This is where you glue the eyelids to the mechanical eyelids. This takes a steady hand, and this makes me nervous. Mainly the key thing about gluing eyelids is patience. Applying the glue to the jawline, I just simply pull the skin up, glue and secure and press. If you remember the cutout section for the wires that I had showed you earlier in this video, now I'm simply taking some contact cement and flowing it inside this groove and pressing the lip wire in place. With the skin on the skull, here's a skin movement test using the computer. Now back to herring. The thing about cutting fabric fur, it tends to dull even the sharpest razor blades. These Velcro strips will allow me to put a piece of hair here, and I'll be able to remove it if needed to get inside the skull. I cut any wild hairs off because I do not want them to interfere with the mechanics of the servos. And I take the hair cuttings and place them in a Ziploc bag and can be used for later because this hair is gold. Now I can finish gluing the skin down completely. Foam rubber shrinks, and here, as you see, there's about a 1/4 inch of shrinkage. I took a 1/4 piece of foam rubber skin off of a test skin, and I simply filled in the gap. I'm gluing this hair here with contact cement. Contact cement's more rigid, not as flexible as rubber cement. I would lay the strip of hair that's Velcroed later. It would just get in the way at this time. The hair I'm using here is horse yak. This hair is more coarse. This is 10 to 12 inches long, weaved into the fabric. This hair here is more softer. This has a lot more goat hair in it than it does yak and horse. Laying the hair front to back, softer being front and back being coarse. I'm using contact cement. This area here will not move that much, so I'm allowed to use it here. Herring can be time consuming, so just be patient. And the best tool is the hair clips. You cannot go wrong with hair clips. We're herring this part I'm happy with. Now I need to order some more hair. So as I wait for it to come in, I will do some tests. Using Audio City software, recorded my voice and lowered the pitch, and this is what I got.
Creature sound effects.
I had to cut a needle for punching hair, so I cut the needle eye in half. And I made a handle for it out of an old paintbrush. Well, punching hair was a disaster for me. I just didn't like how it worked. When I punched through the foam painted area, it revealed the unpainted area. I didn't like this. I tried different type of needles. I tried everything just to make this work. I even tried folding the hair over the seam, as you see here. Trying to figure out the ways to make the hair work without having to punch it, because punching it was actually destroying my skin. So I decided to glue the hairs in front of the seams. Before I could start gluing hair, I needed to lay the rest of the fabric hair first. I'm using contact cement to glue the hair pieces in place. This pattern here was difficult to cut because I need to make sure that the hair was flowing in a downward angle. With a lot of adhesives, such as rubber cements and contact cement, you tend to get these cobwebs or spider webs, and this can drive you crazy. Now I'm going to cover the seam. I apply a thin layer of rubber cement. I have cut hair off of the fabric. Now gently press in place with a cotton swab. When pressing, it helps if your finger or your swab is wet with water. I keep repeating this process all the way around the outline of the face. When cutting hair off the fabric, you need to make sure that you don't have any loose hairs that are going crazy. Gluing the hair around the seam to hide the seams worked really well. I was really impressed with it, and I was happy with the results. When laying hair, any type of hair, it's difficult when you have to switch sides because you have to change your whole position. Well, the herring's done. It's finished, and I'm happy with the results. The software that I use for my animatronic project comes from brookeshiresoftware.com. And the software is VSA, which stands for Visual Show Automation. Here's a screenshot of the routine I made for making teeth. This software is very easy to use. Using the graphical interface, you can program your routines to create a seamless lip sync animatronic routine.
Making teeth. For your monster making needs. MonsterMakers.com. You have email. I am alive. You have email. I am alive. You have email.
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching my animatronic project video, and I hope you learned something from it. I'm happy with the animatronic, being my first one. Just hope y'all can learn from it. I plan on updating, doing some changes, and hoping to be producing more instructional videos. Thank you.